My friends and I have always been the type of people to sneak into places at night and do stupid stuff. We got drunk in cemeteries, climbed atop buildings we weren't allowed to, things like that. But even a crazy bunch like us wanted to chill sometimes. So when that happened, we met at night and went for hikes in the woods. I have always been fond of the night and the silence it brought. It made me hear my own thoughts better and reflect on what I could do in this life. But of course, I knew those things I did were not something to brag about or be proud of, but it was just fun. So I didn't take it seriously. So after doing some stupid stuff on the side of a road that involved blowing stuff up and lighting the night sky, we decided to take a walk back home through the woods, just to clear our heads a bit. It shouldn't have been anything spectacular. It should have been a regular walk where we laughed and joked about the before-mentioned stupid stuff. Instead, the beating wind made the leaves rumble and sing their song in the night. The crickets responded with their own tune. All of it brought a wave of tremendous peace to my otherwise weary and agitated heart. It made me feel like living in a world where I hadn't had to worry about anything. It brought me joy and calmness, a sense of belonging and safety. We all knew the road back home like the palm of our hand, but when the building appeared in front of us, the certainty of things being wrong, and maybe even unnatural, hit us all in the back of our heads like a steel hammer, with full force and a sense of reality check. Despite all my efforts to understand what was going on at that precise moment in time, the impossibility of getting a grip on how the events would later unfold was beyond me. The nocturnal tranquility would soon be reverted to primordial chaos. Nevertheless, the crooked building had an eerie feeling. It felt disgustingly evil and rotten to the core. It was something that hell had vomited to our world after it had gotten sick, feeding on disease and sin. That wasn't the only thing that felt wrong about it. I felt a call to go in. It beckoned me to explore it, to go inside and touch its sickly walls and see what death was made of. This felt like a sanctuary where whatever beast lived inside called us to come forth, to let it feed on our blood, innocence, spirit, and will. It breathed life in that abysmal building but needed food to sustain it. Black paint adorned every nook and cranny of the building. It looked alive and fresh. The spires stood like ancient guardians looking to eradicate every threat they might encounter. It looked like some kind of twisted church, like the reverse of a regular holy church. It looked filthy, dark and vicious, diabolical and gruesome. The building had only a set of windows and no doors. Its unnatural shape made me feel weird when I touched one of its walls. The moment I did that, a black substance, gooey and sticky, bled off from the walls. It was like a dormant giant had just begun crying tears of black blood. From its 4 spires, swarms of bats came out and flew away into the darkness of the night. A tremendous metallic hum followed, almost rendering me deaf. All 4 of us looked at each other with faces as white as sheets. The black goo that infected the entirety of the building's surface became aware in a way. First, I felt like it looked inside my mind, trying to lure me inside. Then, to my left, the substance retracted in a perfect rectangular shape and revealed a large metallic door. It opened slowly, and a putrescent vile smell crawled up the nostrils and descended into my lungs. Lee puked his guts out. "What the hell is this thing?" he asked. He gently rubbed the corners of his mouth with shaking hands. "I have a bad feeling about this." "Do you guys feel it too?" asked Amanda. I nodded, and Lucas sighed. "Let's leave it and go home," I half-mouthed. "I know this would probably suck, but I want to see what's inside. This thing appeared out of nowhere, and it is making me curious to see what it is all about," said Lucas. "We're experts at this type of thing, right?" We went in, and now stood before an altar. Whoever resided here had placed an offering on the stone surface. Dim light scattered throughout the room, but we could see everything inside. From left to right, I saw half a human arm with the bones sticking out and bloody fingers, an incense that emitted white smoke, strips of skin, and a human heart. We wanted to go back in a second, but the black goo had swallowed the door. The building gave us bait, and we took it like champions. We glanced at each other, and the image plastered on our eyes reflected the same thing. The thought that this would be our final resting place, our tomb where no one would ever find us, shook us to the core. A creaking noise came from another room of the building. I trembled and looked behind me. We all did. The goo looked at us with eyes that weren't there. Then, lo and behold, another door appeared. It opened itself again, and we passed through. Amanda screamed. Lucas puked again. Lee's tears flowed like small rivers to an unknown destination. And I knew that whatever beast, whatever monster lived inside, be it human or not, would kill us all. Goosebumps prickled the skin on my arms, and a cold shiver tried to tear apart my spine. The gruesome picture before us all made us question our sanity. Shivering, we looked at dead people nailed to the walls. Some had huge nails driven through the center of their foreheads. Others had them in their eyes, chests, hands, or feet. Whatever did this had also torn open rib cages, mocking them and making them look like grotesque butterflies of death and blood. "Who are you?" a voice from the darkness asked, raspy and demanding, evil beyond comprehension, but tired still. It hated seeing humans before its eyes, especially live ones. The beast loved to mock the human race too. Otherwise, I couldn't explain the grotesque tableau that adorned the walls of its house of death. It loved to look at people suffering and dying. It rejoiced in blood and death was the only thing it served. I heard a chain rattling. I asked who you are, and the most important thing is, what are you doing in my house? The voice said again. The beast or man didn't want to reveal just yet. "We are lost, mister. Just a group of friends who got lost," is all Amanda said with a quivering voice. The chain rattled one more time. "Do you like what you see? I made this work of art myself. It took me some time to finish, but I've done it. I call it Where Life and Hunger Meet, and the result is what you see," it said again from the shadows. Lee stepped in. "I loved it, man. It's really something to look at, you know. It speaks volumes. Suffice it to say, this will be forever embedded in the back of my mind," he said. Of course it was disgusting, but Lee knew how to act like a veritable strategist. In every challenging situation we had found ourselves in, Lee morphed the environment and twisted the emotions so that he managed to get us out and have it our way. The chain suddenly struck him in the chest. He coughed blood. We all screamed. A sharp metal arrowhead that ended the chain blasted his heart. He dropped to his knees and gave his final breath after saying, "At least I tried." "Now, do we have any more liars in the house?" he said as he slowly dragged Lee's body into the shadows. I heard bones snap, and the beast started tearing Lee's flesh open. It fed off it, gulping the blood and chewing the skin and flesh. Amanda had watery eyes, and she trembled at the sounds. We all did. "No, we don't. You have us trapped here, so you might as well kill the rest of us and be done with it," Lucas said. "It's not that easy, my friend," the beast said, but the voice came from a different part of the room. "What if I tell you I can make you live forever? What would you say about that?" A grave-like silence fell onto the room. "No," Amanda said. "I wasn't asking," the voice said. From the shadows it finally emerged. Wearing a black robe, the monster had deathly white skin. Its dead black eyes screamed bloody murder. Its arms hung limp, and in its hands with long black fingernails, blood and intestines from Lee fell on the floor. Instead of a nose, he had two small holes, and behind his smile on those diseased purple lips, sharp teeth shone in the dark. In a millisecond, the beast teleported in front of Amanda, grabbed her by the neck and looked at me. "I sense you have something to say, young man. Something that you really mean. You have something in your heart you want to let out," he asked me while turning his head. "Call me Eerie." "Yes, I do have something to say. I will stay with you and be your disciple if you let my friends go. Let them go home safe and sound, and I'll stay. You won't have any use for us if we're dead, will you?" "Well, except for feeding purposes," I said as I felt my heart drumming inside my chest. "Johnny, no Lucas," screamed. Amanda whimpered as the beast licked the falling tears off her cheeks with a disgusting long purple tongue that looked like an alien worm. "Are you sure about that, young man? There are things that no man has ever seen, and there are secrets and forbidden knowledge that will play with your mind indescribably," the beast said, interest nesting in his big black eyes. "Yes, I am," I replied boldly. "Brave and honest. I think we'll get along just fine. You too. Leave now before I change my mind," he yelled with his raspy voice, pointing to a wall where a door had appeared. He then came behind me and bit my neck. While healthy blood left my body, something else replaced it. Something cursed and evil. It made me sick, and it made me go insane. It made me feel a pang of insatiable hunger. It made me do things that I don't remember doing. There is something else inside me at times, taking control over my whole body and spirit. The mind is poisoned with the worms of death. It hurts. The screams inside my head hurt me, and the greedy voices always want more. They want more blood, more guts, more death, and this is something I can never stop. The red I see before my eyes is forever. When I was 14, me and a couple friends were walking down the road and we noticed an old building back in the woods. Naturally, we went and checked it out. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary at first, but after a few minutes of exploring, we noticed that the basement had been sealed off with large rocks and mortar. This piqued our interest, so we had a friend of ours bring a camera over and we returned to the house just after sunset. We had one person stand at the door and record everybody else while we explored again. After what I believe was about 3 minutes, I looked directly at the camera and said something along the lines of, "Guys, I have a weird feeling. I think we should go." At that exact moment, something took off from right behind me. The cameras didn't catch what it was, but it did get a large shadow moving incredibly fast, and it seemed to be floating no bounce in the movement like you would expect from an animal or person. Nobody really talked about it for 4 years until I told another friend of mine. He insisted on going. When we got there, I immediately noticed a hole had been knocked into the floor leading to the basement. He convinced me to lower him down. He wasn't down there for much more than 10 seconds, and he started screaming for me to get him out. To this day, he won't talk about what he saw down there. I have lived in the same small town since I was born, and driven down the same roads my whole life, known the same people and gone to the same schools. Nothing has ever really happened here, so I never imagined something like this was possible. Back in my freshman year of high school, I was an airsoft fanatic. So when a new student, Jackson, arrived with a love for the game, we became quick friends. We got together to practice all the time, and being dumb high schoolers, we came up with some very stupid methods of practicing our airsoft skills, the most notable of which was clearing buildings. However, we knew our houses too well and required a new building to clear. When Jackson proposed the idea of clearing the abandoned radio station a few miles through the woods from his house, I barely questioned the idea. We were both pretty good at room clearing, and I had driven past it so many times it seemed harmless. But we should have known better. On our first trip out to the building, Jackson and I went during daylight with our pocket knives to a little preliminary scouting. We searched through the main rooms of the building and got the general idea of what we were looking at. A one-story building with a crawl space in the ceiling and few offices and corridors branching off from a main room in the center. The windows were all missing and all the doors were locked, with a large open area at the back of the whole thing where the loading dock must have been in the past. Everything was covered in dust and mold, and most of rooms appeared to have been untouched for years. About 3 weeks later, Jackson and I convinced our parents to allow us to have an overnight together at his house. Later that night, we opened his bedroom window, tied a rope to his bed frame, and rappelled down the 2 stories and into his backyard before making our trek into the woods. This time armed with the ever-dangerous weapon BB guns. This trip also went without a hitch, as there was a lot of moonlight, and many people were driving up and down the nearby road only a couple hundred yards away. We cleared the whole building, simply finding mold in an area some idiot college students had used to do heroin, as evidenced by the drug paraphernalia lying around on the floor. This trip sealed our fates, as now we had gained enough confidence to undertake another incursion later that year. I wish he had never gone on this third and final trip, as things might be different now, and a gray shape might not have flitted between the buildings beside my car as I drove home tonight. I might not be staring out my window now, hurrying to write this all down, as the footprints appear in the snow in my front yard and wrap around towards the back. We decided to make this third trek of ours in the middle of winter break, since our parents were readily willing to let us have an overnight without the threat of school the next morning. Once again, the window opened, and Jackson and I rappelled ourselves down into his backyard, the crunch of the freshly fallen snow the only sound in the night. We made our way through the woods and sat at the very edge, watching the building from about 50 yards away, our eyes straining, looking for any kind of movement. "Did you see that?" I mouthed to Jackson. What came the almost inaudible response. I thought the darkness was just playing tricks on me, but at the same time I was sure I saw someone walk past one of the windows in a room at the edge of the building. We waited another 15 minutes but saw no movement, so we proceeded with caution, edging up to the side of building and sneaking our way up to the closest door. We had unlocked this exterior door during our last excursion in preparation for this trip and slid inside the main room. We quickly swept the main room, this time using our airsoft guns as our weapon for full effect. We checked the ladder to the crawl space to make sure the dust hadn't been disturbed, and then prepared to begin clearing the rest of building. "I'll cover all the rooms in front of us while you clear the bathrooms behind us really quick," I directed Jackson. He turned to leave, but before he could even finish his first step, we both stopped dead in our tracks and turned our attention towards the sound. It was coming from a doorknob. The doorknob, the one connected to the room I thought I had seen movement in. But that was weird, because that room was locked from our side of the door. The door was made of solid steel, because it was the radio room, and the only other exit was that open window socket on the outside of the building. It still makes me shudder to think about what happened next. To both mine and Jackson's horror, the handle began to turn, and the metal of the door was turning with it. The metal was being bent in a tight circle surrounding the handle. Then, with a loud shearing sound, the handle came free, and the door swung open about 2 feet. We both immediately shone our flashlights on the opening to display nothing, but there was undeniably something there. "Police, hands where I can see them," shouted Jackson as he racked the slide on his airsoft Glock and began strobing his flashlight. However, contrary to a drugged guy on heroin, bolting or falling on the ground, the creature swung the door all the way open and began to move. Jackson and I bolted for the loading dock opening and vaulted over the small wall built there to dock trucks before sprinting for the woods. Upon entering the woods, we both covered ourselves with leaves and waited about 20 yards back from the edge to see if anything crossed the 50-yard space between the edge of the woods and the building. Nothing happened for a moment, and then without a sound, a black silhouette shot across the open area to the edge of the woods with inhuman speed, covering the space in less than 2 seconds, before standing at the edge of the woods and peering deep into the dark, searching. Then it was gone as suddenly as it had appeared. Jackson and I began the trek home by a different route, sticking to a giant open field and walking back to back so as to hopefully see our death coming before it would arrive, and maybe giving us a chance to react. We saw nothing the whole walk home, and made it back inside through his basement doors, throwing caution to the wind as clambered inside. I slid the door closed behind us. Tap, tap, tap came a sound from the other side of the door. We both froze, grabbing our knives and flinging the door open to see nothing on the other side, except another pair of footprints in the snow following ours right up to the door. We quickly tracked the prints around the corner and into Jackson's backyard, only to watch them disappear into thin air 20 yards deep into his backyard. We hurried back inside and boarded up for the night before falling asleep in his room. The next morning, we went into the basement to discover half of our gear was missing. Over the next year, on a necklace. We moved on with our lives and agreed not to share the story ever, or to always pass it off as fiction. Well, last year I finally told someone the story, and the next morning I found my knife on hanger in my closet, where I normally hang my shirts. So, I know I would have seen it. Last month, Jackson and his father both went on vacation, or at least that is what the school is telling us. I don't think he was that lucky. I hope no one ever goes near that building again, and that the stories are never shared after this. However, I have run out of time to write as I just heard the sound of shearing metal coming from my basement.